Hey there, my name's Lockie. I'm a Microsoft technical trainer. It's good to be here with you. In this video, we're going to continue looking at the audit and search activity capabilities of Purview, and we are specifically interested in one piece of it, the Microsoft Purview content search capabilities. Now, content search is part of a much broader ecosystem within Purview, but we're going to be utilizing it as part of the information protection framework capabilities of searching and investigating user activity and content. For more information on the framework, head on over to learn.microsoft.com. Now, I want to talk a little bit about incident investigation before we get started, because content search actually comes under the content solution of another piece of the Purview stack, e-discovery. This will give us a bit of an idea about what the purpose of it is, because investigations in M365 typically begin in one of two ways. A policy violation, some sort of alert comes through, or as part of a general investigation trying to find an answer to a question that we have. Ultimately, there's really two main questions we're trying to solve when we start one though. What happened? Who did what, when, and why? And what actually was involved? What did we touch? What was used? What was shared? What was opened? The main components of the blast radius to understand how big this problem is. Now, these two questions are typically solved with two different types of tools. So, for example, if I want to know more about the what happened, I'm likely to go more towards some of my audit capability tools, whereas the investigative components that are available are going to be more useful for understanding individual files, emails, messages, these sorts of things that might be available. So, across the two, we have an easy mapping. The audit capabilities within Purview are focused on the reviewing of actions, understanding who did what, when, and why. But then what they actually accessed, the specific content, is usually contained within an e-discovery investigation. Investigations are a way for us to scope what we are doing and ensure that it's contained and any evidence is gathered in a single spot. We want to ensure that if we are building a corpus of information to show that a threat actor or an internal user or someone has potentially infiltrated or caused damage to our environment, maybe causing a data spill, something like that, that the information is contained in a single location. This is what a legal team and an HR team are going to need to be able to support their investigations and get their job done once it comes time to actually take action at the end. So we can use this as a way to bundle all of this information together. On top of that, e-discovery also allows us to go through and export information. So once we've completed our content searches, we can use this as part of the gathering of info, so then the export can happen for evidentiary reasons. So let's focus in on that. As part of e-discovery, content search is available. So how do we use it? What's it designed for? And how do we actually leverage it? There are some specific roles that are going to be required to access content search because it is a fairly privileged action. The ability to look across essentially all information within an environment, it comes with a few privileged actions, of course. So we want to make sure that we've got that set up correctly. I'll talk about how we actually run searches, including a couple of things to think about, and what some of the data sources you can use are. There's going to be a statistics preview page, and I want to talk through what are some of the things you can expect to see there before you go through an export for investigation or evidentiary documentation. Let's get started. Now, content search is a component of e-discovery. So let's define where one begins and the other ends. Essentially, they're a Venn diagram. The e-discovery component contains content search, but the intent is slightly different. Content search is the act and the action and the tool that we use to go through and find the messages and documents and individual emails that make up our broader investigation, the evidence that we use. Whereas e-discovery is more focused on providing case tooling to allow HR, legal, and all of the required people to work together in a single location with structured review and access controls built around it. Content search is for targeted locations. We want to be able to look across single sources or specific spots within our environment to find further info. We're essentially trying to ensure that we target stuff very clearly. Whereas e-discovery is more focused on finding where we need to hold information for a longer period of time. So if something is deleted, we can continue to retain it to ensure we meet our legal cases. There are also industries where freedom of information components may also come into play. E-discovery is the tool that we use for this as well. So it's holding this sort of secondary piece of not only the containing of information and collation, but ensuring that we keep it for the period of time that the investigation is open. This is going to be a really interesting kind of paradigm to work with because content search itself, the results may need to be escalated into a case for broader review, but it's not always the case. Sometimes the search is just about gathering the information and finding what is relevant to your particular spot. The best thing to understand where the delineation lies, though, is who leverages it. For security investigations, HR, misuse inquiries, that sort of thing, content search tends to be the tool of choice. But if we need to do a broader legal or regulatory matter, and that is the thing we are trying to address, or there is some sort of breach investigation, or we need to ensure preservation for whatever other reason, that is where an e-discovery case contains additional features beyond just the basic content search itself. Now, because it does have some very specific requirements around role access, we do need to make sure we get the right roles in place. But because content search is part of a different tooling, we need to actually go through and assign tooling relevant to that. So e-discovery is the main one we use for the ability to manage cases, but it also contains the ability to use the search and export information. So this is perfect if we need to have someone who is actually working within this space. It's also worth noting, global administrators do not actually have access to e-discovery by default. This is one of the few roles that requires an explicit permission set to be able to get access. If you do need to go through and actually manage cases more broadly and you want visibility into all cases and all results, an e-discovery administrator role will be required. This is one of the most privileged roles you can have in an organization, so make sure you assign it with care and keep least privilege in mind when you are building this role structure out. The easiest way to confirm the access is actually just to go to the portal. If you see the case page, you'll be able to know that you're in the correct role and license, but if not, you won't have access to that component there. All right, so we've got our permissions set up, we've got things ready in the portal. How do we actually use content search? When we go through and we start a search with content search, we need to give a name and description before we do anything else. This is important. We need to be able to understand what it is we are actually looking for. It's also worth noting that a case is mandatory. This is the secure container where all of the investigative actions related to the search are going to be contained. So only members of the case are able to see the search results. So even if you create your own content search, it is still going to be bundled within a case structure. Cases are extremely useful for a range of different reasons, but one of the big ones is an audit trail. It gives it clear definition about who accessed when and why. We need to be able to know, especially for legal or regulatory purposes, why you went and searched for that. What were the terms you were using and how did you find this? This is extremely important to ensure that in a legal team scenario, we have the evidentiary requirements that we did our due diligence. Once we go through and we start building out our content search structure, we can then go through and actually conduct the search itself. Now, it's an unusual setup in the order of operations which we work, but it makes sense with this idea of legal or regulatory frameworks built around. The goal is to get meaningful, precision content searches for the things that are relevant to the case. So if we're supporting a case, we need to think about scoping. On the left-hand side, you have the ability to select specific data sources. I'll show this off in the demo, but it's extremely important to select the right sources for what you are looking for. You, in fact, may want to conduct not one search, but multiple searches. It can take some time for an individual search to return, so you may want to think about what information do you need to gather from what locations and start with a filtered subset to begin. If you go through and you search a wide data range for as many things as possible, It's going to take a long time to come back. So start small, start targeted, and make sure you are thinking about what conditions you need to put in place. Now, the condition builder itself on the right-hand side here is what we use when we are a non-technical user. But having said that, if you feel more comfortable with this, feel free to continue using it. Certainly, it is the place that I tend to go. But if you prefer, you can also use the KeyQL language. The keyword query language, or if you have access, Copilot for Security can assist with writing queries to help you find the right information from the right source at the right time and then filter it accordingly. So if you are building these things out, build out the query in whatever way you like using either the builder or by going through and building the query manually, conduct the search, and then see what results come back. Now, if we need to export data, the process is pretty straightforward. Once a search is complete, in this particular case, a search called Feb 2025 Com Investigation, we can go through and actually just export the individual files here. I've got a PST file, I've got some individual Word documents and things like that. Essentially, native file types as well as mailbox types are supported here. Any metadata, including the search config, timestamps, user context, they're all stored within this as well. The secure zip file has a manifest, it has logs, and we can track exports using a unique ID and hash. As we go through and build out these downloadable packages, we're essentially trying to work in a chain of custody scenario. So if we need to take this into an isolated environment to trawl through the documents by hand, we can have a clear idea of when things were handed to certain people, under what scenarios, and why it was done. Ultimately, the goal here is to be able to find all of the information you need, collate it into a single spot, and then export it for further analysis to the experts in the forensic field to get the information they require for legal purposes. There is a couple of best practices here. Make sure you are going through and using the indexed view if you need to review more advanced components. There's an e-discovery component within that. And it is also good to ensure that people know that downloads are actually secured via a tokenized URL. So they will expire after a set period. Just keep that in mind as part of the structure. People will need to re-log in to re-download, and this is by design. The goal here is a principle of legal defensibility, that we have a clear chain of when information left one system and entered another, and that the data is contained in an auditable fashion for the purposes of that legal or regulatory framework retention. Now let's jump across into the content search itself. I'm going to show you how to conduct a simple search. We'll go through and create a case in the process so you can see that as well. And we'll get ourselves started with our first search across the environment. Now we're over in the Microsoft Purview portal again. And since content search is part of that broader e-discovery platform, we do first need to head to the e-discovery solution. Remember, you need to have a case to be able to do searches within the content search structure, or at the very least, that is the hard recommendation. This makes it significantly easier to be able to find the details you're looking for later, and if you conduct multiple searches that are related to one another, they will all coexist in the same case. Cases not only provide structure, but also the ability to set things like permissions, so it's important to make sure that you utilize them. We're first going to create a case here so you can have repeatability and structure. This one's going to be a financial data exposure review case, so we're looking for certain types of sensitive information related to financial components. Since this is going to work to contain searches, if someone down the line needs to convert this across and use it for holds or exporting of data, it just keeps everything above board and clean. Note that ability to flick on and off premium features based on your requirements as well, so feel free to turn that to whatever setting is required for the particular thing you're looking to undertake. Now, as this loads up, we will have the ability to hit the Create Search button here, but we're now basically locked into the case. If I want to go through and attempt to conduct a content search without being in this case, no, hitting content search doesn't take me there. This is a shortcut to the same searches page. If you want to go through and conduct a different type of search, you'll first need to head elsewhere, typically back to cases, and then conduct the context search from there. Note that even on this page, it is still with case settings. We're still asking, where is this contained? And the answer, if we go back to our cases page, is going to be a case called content search. So always create a case so it is named and easy to find later. For that purpose, we are going to go to the financial data exposure review case that we built and get ourselves started with a search. I'll hit create search here to be able to go off and basically find the information we're looking for. And once it is loaded, we will see the same name dialog again. Yes, there is a separate name and description for each individual search. This just makes it easy for investigators down the line to know what it was when you were looking for, the intent and the scope of the search that you're working with. Now, we're looking for some common high-risk financial terms here. We're keeping this fairly basic though, so we're going to do a scoped search, and it will seem broad, but I assure you this is quite a scoped search in the scheme of e-discovery. I'm going to add some data sources now, and I want to specifically add information related to Exchange, SharePoint, OneDrive, and M365 groups. Note all of the additional filters you have on the left here. So if you need to filter this not to a group like I am, we're only looking at the finance team in this particular case, but instead only to specific types of sources. We can use this as a way to scope things down. The moment I selected the finance team, I was presented with some other options that suddenly became selectable too. I've gone with just the basic options there, mailboxes and sites, which is the default. Once I save that search, it is still not yet actually conducted. I need to go through and either build my KeyQL query or go through and put in the details I'm searching for so the portal can help me build the query myself. We're going to just do a simple search, bank account or credit card, and we see the KeyQL up the top of the screen there. If you want to learn more about how the condition builder works, or you're looking to learn more about KeyQL broadly, head on over to the learn.microsoft.com page and search for KeyQL for additional information about how to work with the query language natively. However, as I mentioned, I prefer to work with the visual language here. It keeps it nice and easy to find the details you're looking for, and you can add additional conditions or even do translation actions if we need to. All right, we've got the pieces we need. We can simply hit Run Query at this point, and once the search is ready to go, there is a couple of additional settings we have, including what categories we want to pull. Do we only want to pull a sample of data because we're concerned that we're looking too big and too wide? We can essentially filter things down if we need to. I'll just select a couple of these to only pull some summaries as we need them, and then we'll hit Run. Once you hit that Run query, it will take a little bit of time to go and find the relevant information, even if you select something like the sample option. So make sure that once you hit Run, you take a step away, go do some other work, and we'll be back here in a tick once the query has done its work. With our statistics page now loaded, we can see 32 total matches. We see out of the locations I scoped, 5 of the 6 contained information relevant to my hit. Even within the data source structure, I can see it was everything from the finance team, but I've got the matches that we looked at. Note the SITs are coming through as part of this structure. Searches like this within the content search give you a great way to be able to perform legal review processes into incident investigation, escalations, anything you need to do, whether you are in the compliance state or working within a broader investigative suite. Even those within the security space, even those within the compliance space, regardless of the area you work, there is always something that is useful when we use our compliance search and the content search capabilities within eDiscovery. This video has focused on just one component of the broader auditing stack, the content search. For more information, you can take a look at the broader eDiscovery environment and the documentation available on learn.microsoft.com. Thank you for joining us for this video, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.